im se svima, i malima i velikima, i bogatima i siromašnima, i slobodnjacima i robovima, dade žig na njihovu desnu ruku ili na čela njihova, te da nitko ne može ništa kupiti ili prodati, osim onoga ko ima žig ili ime zvijeri ili broj imena njezina.
Pozdrav, dragi narode, dobrodošli još jednu epizodu Slobodni. Moja današnja gošća je izuzetna dama i nju neki zovu i najcenzuriranijom doktoricom u Sjedinjenim Državama. Zato će mi biti posebno zadovoljstvo je predstaviti vama i posebno zadovoljstvo da je pitamo što to skrivaju, što ona ima za reći. Ona je doktorica, njeno ime je gospođa Mary Talley Bowden. Hello, Dr. Bowden. Welcome to our show in Croatia.
Thanks so much for having me.
Please, can you say a few words about your background?
I'm an ear, nose, and throat sleep medicine specialist in Houston, Texas. I treat primarily respiratory disorders. So when COVID came along, I was just welcomed people into my office. And I ended up becoming sort of a COVID treatment hub in my area. And I was sort of left to myself, but then I got called out by a hospital in Houston, and it kind of thrust me into the public. I was seen firsthand that these shots weren't working because I was doing testing and I was tracking people by their vaccination status. And I brought this to the attention of Houston Methodist Hospital, and they were the first hospital in the country to mandate the shots. They did it in April of 2021. And this was 5 months before Biden, so they really paved the way for the rest of the country. And I had privileges there, and they, when I brought this to their attention that the shots weren't working, they glossed it over. And so I started speaking out on social media, and then they really viciously attacked me, and they turned me in the medical board. I am still fighting the medical board. So it's just been an unexpected journey.
And they tried to shut you down. You tweeted that this vaccine doesn't work. And then what happened?
Well, at the same time I started speaking out about the shots not working, I spoke out against mandates. Then I was trying to help a patient who was trapped in a hospital. He had been on a ventilator for a month. Wife was suing the hospital because she wanted him to try ivermectin. The hospital had basically given up and they were talking hospice. Hospital would not let her do it. This is Texas Hughley Hospital. So she sued, and then she asked me to help. I served as an expert witness and then as the prescribing doctor. Hospital turned me into the medical board the moment I became involved in this lawsuit. And so that, I had 2 hospitals turn me into the medical board, and, 4 years later, I am still fighting to clear my name.
I'm sure that you will be successful, but you also treated your patients with treatment what was very successful. That means that we had some cure from the start, but they banned it. What happened?
Yeah, initially I used hydroxychloroquine. And then when President Trump came out and started speaking about how great it was, Texas shut it down. Like, we were not allowed to prescribe hydroxychloroquine off label. Like, we could only prescribe it for lupus. So I kind of put that on the back burner. And then I started using monoclonal antibodies, and those worked really well. They weren't controversial. I could get as many doses as I wanted, and it was great. And then unfortunately, the government shut down distribution. They took over the distribution and then they just shut it down. And this was in lockstep with mandating the COVID shots. So the same time that they mandated the shots, they took away monoclonal antibodies. And that's when I started using alternatives like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. And I was a little bit nervous about using them at first because monoclonal antibodies worked so well. I wasn't sure that, the ivermectin would do the trick. But what I found was that it did work. And I everybody that came to see me who got early treatment stayed out of the hospital. I ended up treating over 6,000 patients during the pandemic.
Your story is similar to other stories. And I also spoke with lots of doctors who had the same experience. What do you think? What was the reason why they shut down ivermectin when it was so cheap and so effective?
Well, I think it was very orchestrated. So, in March of 2021, the government was upset because people were not buying it. They were not getting these shots. They didn't trust this new product that hadn't been thoroughly tested. And at that time, only 10% of Americans had gotten the shots. So they knew part of the problem was that people were using ivermectin. And they thought, well, I have ivermectin, so why do I need this shot? So they came after ivermectin publicly. The FDA put out information on their website citing, okay, you should not take ivermectin for COVID. It was in the spring, and then in the summer, late summer, and this was during the third and the largest surge of the pandemic. They sent out a tweet of the attractive healthcare worker nuzzling the horse. It says, "Seriously, y'all, you're not a horse, you're not a cow. Stop it." And that was put out by the FDA, and it went viral, and it made it super difficult for me to prescribe ivermectin. It resulted in complaints to the medical boards for myself and other people all over the country. And so they did that very late August of 2021. And right after that, Biden mandated the shots. So I think it was all wrapped in with the mRNA shots that they had to get out there, and they were pushing on people. They had to take away ivermectin as an alternative to these shots.
As I know, they need to pull back this tweet, and now it's not there anymore. How this happened? They said ivermectin is not working, and finally, I think after some court cases or something else, they need to pull down. And we know now today that state was censoring, together with Twitter, censoring all doctors who were prescribing something similar.
Yeah, and we sued the FDA over what they did over ivermectin and actually won, and they had to take down their misinformation off the website. And in America, I don't know how it is in Croatia, but the FDA sort of regulates what doctors can prescribe and what's over the counter. But 5 states, including Texas, have made it so that you can get ivermectin without a prescription. You still have to go through a pharmacist, so it's not technically over the counter, but it's slightly easier to get it now because you don't have to go to the doctor's office first to get a prescription. You can just show up at the pharmacy and buy it there.
Well, in Croatia, they're following gold standard of CDC. And when I saw their presentation of vaccines, they said, if CDC doesn't have anything against it, we don't see the reason why we should. And that's how they didn't mandate it vaccines, but they push it very hard, same like everywhere in the world. Okay, after that, now we have 4 and 5 years later, and now things are looking differently, but still they are pushing mRNA vaccines. In Croatia, they are still recommending even for pregnant women. How you can explain this after all this, what happened, and this new knowledge, what we have and what is already in the public?
Yeah, it's astounding to me. I mean, I don't think anybody should get these shots, but I certainly don't think pregnant women or children should get these shots. Pregnant women in the U.S. are supposedly not allowed to eat turkey, because it could hurt the fetus. But we're going to put this mRNA shot with, I don't know. I just see so much damage from these shots. I've never seen it with any other product on the market. On a daily basis, I'm reminded of how dangerous they are. I see patients still 4 years later whose lives were completely destroyed by these shots. And COVID has evolved into a cold. I mean, it is, I did used to worry about my COVID patients. I do not worry about my COVID patients anymore. I don't, I used to give my cell phone out to everybody who had COVID because I was worried about them. And some people would get really sick, but I'm not seeing that anymore at all. There is no reason for pregnant women or anybody for that matter to put themselves at risk with these shots.
I had a few guests and they were vaccine injured. There was one professional sportsman from Norway, then one lady from Netherlands, and just last one was Dr. Joel Warskog, who was also vaccine injured. And I showing everything in Croatia, and people are seeing this. I can say that very few people are trusting in these vaccines, but still they don't want to investigate, and they don't want to talk about it. Just recommending, because we now have a season of flu, and at the same time they are recommending flu vaccines and mRNA against COVID-19. That doesn't make any sense, but they are still doing this. What is your explanation?
Yeah, so the last CDC meeting, the ACIP meeting, which was an advisory committee, the CDC admitted that only 10% of healthcare workers are getting COVID shots, are getting the latest version. So I know there's a lot of media coverage, people are pushing people to get these shots, but I think in reality, very few are doing it. So that gives me hope. We just need to keep, getting the message out and educating the public, because I don't think the government is on our side on this matter, obviously.
Yeah, that's why we are here today also. That means that people doesn't trust anymore to institutions and doesn't trust in public health. What will happen in the future in case of public health emergency of international concerns, according to the WHO? Then they will have to go and do additional vaccines and other countermeasures. Is that going to make any new trouble for them, because nobody will trust them?
Yeah, I think the next pandemic, people will have a much more lukewarm response than they did with COVID and be much more cautious. I don't know what the uptake of the shot was in Croatia, but in America, 80% got the COVID shots. I think that would be far, far lower the next go around. And I've said in the past, like maybe our best hope at real change is just spring on us in the near future before everybody forgets, or there's another generation. Because right now people are a little bit complacent, but I think if it were in their face, if they tried to lock us down again, put masks on us again, force a shot on us again, right now people would rise up.
In Croatia, there was 70% of adults who took vaccines, at least one. But after that, it was much lower. 54% was with the two vaccines. And then after that, everything went down below 10%. But still, we didn't have a chance to investigate what was happening during pandemic. We'll see in the future. You also established organization Americans for Health Choice. And what was this organization about?
Well, we've only done one foundational project, and it's basically to recruit politicians to simply state that the COVID shot should be pulled off the market. I was, cruising the internet, and I saw Representative Brad Paquette, who is from Michigan. He's a young guy who developed myocarditis after the Pfizer shots, and he was posting about it. And so I said, hey, would you be willing to state that they should be pulled off the market? And he wholeheartedly responded yes. And so that was the inciting incident that got me on this mission to recruit as many politicians as I could. And all they have to do is say, yes, the COVID shot should be pulled off the market. And the theory being that, the more people that we get speaking out, the more likely it is it'll actually happen, because these politicians, none of them are getting these shots anymore, very few. And yet they're staying very quiet. And, my argument is, if these shots aren't safe enough for you, or not safe enough for your children or your grandchildren, then why are they safe enough for your constituents? And you should speak up. So I'm trying to, get as many people to just come forward, and courage is contagious.
There is a group called North Group in Europe, and I'm in contact with them, and they're also demanding to remove these mRNA shots from the market. But still, it's now there's almost every state in Europe is a member of this group, scientists and politicians. But still they are recommending. My conclusion is that they are trying to hide criminal what they've done during pandemic, and that's why they are still pushing, and we can say they are still lying to the public that it's safe and effective.
Most definitely. And I don't know if you saw, President Trump had Albert Bourla in the Oval Office recently, and then got the shots himself, or a booster shot. So I just think we're on our own. I don't think the government is going to do anything, at least during this administration.
Well, this is a new administration, and I saw behind was Secretary Kennedy, and we both know what he was writing, especially in his book, The Real Anthony Fauci, and we know what was opinion from new chief of FDA and the new chief of INS. And do you have any hope that maybe they will succeed? Because according to Trump, Warp Speed was very successful, and he is very proud, and he called himself father of vaccines. And also he posted something that there is some people who's talking about COVID shots. They're not really successful, and we want data from pharmaceutical companies. But after that, he took shot and even flew. How this happened?
Yeah, so a lot of people speculate that this is 4D chess and this is all strategic. I tend to think of him as somebody that doesn't have a big filter, and he kind of says what he thinks. My belief is that he did get a booster, and he does love himself for Operation Warp Speed, and he's going to ruin his legacy. So he's going to go down as the father of these mRNA shots, who could have done something about this. He could have, come clean with the public, but instead he's perpetuating it, and that will be his legacy, and that's very sad.
What about Secretary Kennedy?
I am frustrated. I thought more would have happened by now. Granted, I'm not in his shoes. It's hard for me to know how difficult it is for him to get things done. But he was super outspoken about the COVID shots, and now he's very quiet. And I have concerns that the agenda was shifted to food, and sort of pushing aside the pandemic, pushing aside mRNA, and with the focus now on cleaning up our food supply, which I have no problem with. I mean, I completely agree, but not at the expense of not talking about the pandemic or mRNA.
Well, I think that maybe billions what are in the play are important here, because according to what we now know about Pfizer, there is a contract also what was was still hidden in Europe, and there is a big mess with these SMS messages from Ursula von der Leyen and Pfizer Burla, and still nothing is cleaned, and we have everybody doubts that they are doing really transparent business. But finally, now they are receiving 70 billion from United States government for the new investment, and they are talking this publicly. I think for me, this is strange.
Yeah, it seems like a backroom deal. And Pfizer is investing 70 billion of their own money into the U.S. But what kind of deal? What kind of negotiations? It seems like, okay, you do this, Pfizer, and we will set aside all our concerns over what you did during the pandemic, is what I imagine happened.
We'll see. Okay, we'll give them more time because we don't have any other options. There is still some of my guests who said that they are still trust in Secretary Kennedy, that he will do his part. He needs to be very clever and also very patient. We'll see. I'm not satisfied neither, because I had lots of guests, even from Children's Health Defense, even from people who are now working for new government. And I was expecting something else from them. But let's go back a little bit to pandemic. Let's imagine that you were in charge, you were on position of Mr. Fauci in that moment when the pandemic started. What would you do differently from him?
Well, they didn't listen to the doctors like myself that were treating patients. There were doctors treating patients in the hospitals that probably had some input. But because most doctors basically shut their doors and said, go to the emergency room if you can't breathe. But then there were a few doctors like myself that said, just, come on in and we will throw the kitchen sink at you and do everything we can to keep you out of the hospital. And we were basically shunned. We were cast aside, we were censored, we were smeared. So Hopefully, and I do think Kennedy, if there were a pandemic, another one, that Kennedy would give people like myself a voice in what happens. I think that I would trust him on that. And to his credit, Trump did recognize hydroxychloroquine as a treatment option very early on. Unfortunately, when he did that, it kind of, there was a backlash against the drug. And so, even in Texas, which is like, freedom loving, supposedly, we could not get it just because Trump, recommended it and praised it. So I don't know that we saw this strange phenomenon where the government and these government doctors who were not seeing patients and they were basically doing Zoom calls from their bedrooms were telling everybody how to treat COVID and using very rigid protocols and completely discrediting the doctors that were seeing everything firsthand.
Well, finally, this virus was not that dangerous as they expected. Even the biggest immunologist in the world, Bill Gates, said finally that he was mild, not deadly like they were expecting after he earned $500 million on the shares of Pfizer. But they put us all in lockdown. They said lockdown is here just to prevent crisis in hospitals. But you have some data from it, and there was never crisis in hospital, and lockdown didn't help anything, and even mask didn't help. That means any measure didn't help, and they still were pushing hard and forcing for more than 3 years.
Yeah, so we were lucky in Texas. We were not locked down for 3 years. Were you locked down for 3 years in Croatia?
No. Measures were for 3 years. We were twice locked down, first in 2020 for 2 months, and then on the end of 2020 and beginning 2021 for 2.5 months. But measures and other things, finally, officially, pandemic finished in 2023. That means everything lasted for 3 years. And I didn't saw the reason why.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there were COVID was a little more aggressive than other viruses I had seen. But it was manageable. I mean, like I said, if they got in my office and I treated them early, the first week, I kept them out of the hospital. And I did have some very sick people come to my office who were in the second or third week of illness, oxygen levels in the 60s. I've never seen that before. If somebody walking and talking with an oxygen saturation in the 60s is pretty unusual. But I was able to help them too. I mean, basically just throwing the kitchen sink at them, keeping them out of the hospital. But yeah, it very quickly evolved into a much milder disease.
What was condition in hospitals? I heard from some of my guests that was a good opportunity for hospitals to earn some money, and that they get compensation for keeping patients in hospitals, even for treating them. And finally, the biggest money came if they die from COVID. Is this true?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, there were financial incentives to put them on a ventilator, to diagnose them with COVID. So let's say they came in on a car wreck, had nothing to do with COVID. They would test them for COVID. And if they tested positive, they would get a bonus. And you're right, if they had COVID on their death certificate, they had a bonus. I don't know what your system was like, and then the hospitals were very rigid. Most hospitals would not allow visitors, so people were dying alone. They were subjected to rigid protocols. They were persecuted if they were not vaccinated. So now I wasn't in the hospitals at all, so I'm going off of charts that I've reviewed. But I've seen several examples where, the patient, every single note says not vaccinated, like a mark on their record. And I'd never seen that before. Like you see people with the flu, and you would maybe in the initial assessment, they might say didn't get a flu shot, but it wouldn't be on every single note saying, not vaccinated for flu if they ended up in the hospital. So it was very obvious. They were starving people. They were not giving them nutrition. They were dehydrating them. There was some false misconception that there was too much fluid in the lungs. So they would restrict fluid, and then they would give them diuretics to try to, dry them out, which then is very hard on the kidneys. And then if you give them a remdesivir, which is also very hard on the kidneys as well, on top of that, then you're looking at a double whammy on kidneys and kidney failure. This case that I've been fighting about with the medical board, they basically refused to give this patient the opportunity to get a second opinion. I mean, the hospital granted me emergency temporary privileges, and the court did, and the hospital basically refused to obey the court order. And when they were very worried about him getting ivermectin, they wrapped up his feeding tube with towels to prevent anybody from sneaking it in, and then they turned me into the medical board, and it's hard because these hospitals are protected. We have something called the PrEP Act, which protects the hospitals from any liability that happened during the pandemic. I don't know if y'all have that, but that's been a big hurdle to overcome to try to get any accountability.
Yes, I heard about this PrEP Act. I had also one show about this. But what is strange for me, how is it possible that the whole world was in the same position, especially in the western part, that everybody was acting similarly? We now have documents. For example, I had a show from Germany, and they saw from the start that there was no science behind their measures, but they are still continuing. European Union took over 1 trillion of euros credit for saving economy after lockdown, after pandemic. That means everything has changed after pandemic, but still they were pushing same thing, and they knew very early the real truth. And I really still cannot, even I investigate, if I have lots of guests here, I cannot conclude how it's possible that whole world get crazy and do the same thing all around without really obvious reasons and without science, as they told us, trust the science, without science behind it.
Well, fear and propaganda. Biden paid influencers $11.5 billion to spread the safe and effective narrative. So it went out to all these influencer groups to basically just push it on people. And with social media, very effective. So that's what, and then they censored, I lost my Twitter account, my X account for 5 months. I was just completely banned. And I'm still pretty banned on YouTube. I'm not kicked off. I was on probation for a long time. I'm in good standing now, but I get very few views on YouTube. It's just, I think I was kicked off at Instagram. I've kicked off at TikTok multiple times. I'm not back on there now. So the censorship, and then paying people to spread propaganda, and then the fear, and then really spreading that fear so that people are more compliant.
Yeah, I know this experience. I lost my channel twice on YouTube. I was banned for 6 months on Facebook. Still, my account on LinkedIn is banned. And I finally succeed to get a TikTok account this year after 5 years. I experienced this. What do you mean by he gave them money? How he gave them money? Who was these influencers who received so much money for propaganda?
Yeah, the web of money is too complicated to trace, and that's very purposeful. But there was a program launched called COVID-19 Community Core. I believe that one was 10 billion. And then there was a separate program, and I can't remember the name of it, but that was 1.5 billion. It came out actually the day that Houston Methodist declared it was mandating the shot. So April 1st, 2021. And you can look this up, look up COVID-19 Community Core, and it basically just shoots out money to all these influencers. I think it started with 275 groups, but it went out to like 17,000 different organizations, social media influencers, sports affiliations, churches, just all sorts of people.
That's interesting because our prime minister was also gathering all media, mainstream media, together, and he showed them with finger and say, be careful how you report about COVID vaccines, about a pandemic. You need to take care that all this misinformation vanish from the public. And of course, we will support it. It's better to support you than to have lots of people who will die from COVID. That is similar what Biden done in United States.
Yeah. Paid off the media.
Yeah. We see here a pattern. That means we cannot say that was not arranged somewhere and agreed. We know this event 201, what happened in October of 2019. And everything what was there, what they prepared, after a few months happened all around the world. And of course, everybody says that it's a usual thing, but I don't think it's usual. I never experienced this kind of thing in my whole life, and I'm not very young.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never thought any of this would happen.
Yeah. Okay, what will happen in the future? That's very important for me, I'm thinking, because they are telling us that will come next pandemic. They even call this new illness X. We don't know. There is a new agreement. United States decided to pull back from WHO, but Europe is still in this organization, and they are now preparing us. We signed this international health regulation. My question is, what you can expect will happen in future pandemic? And I see that this pandemic can happen even in the next years, maybe even sooner.
Well, you have to remember that, the more virulent or lethal a virus is, the harder it is for it to spread. So if another pandemic happens like COVID, it'll probably be similar in intensity as COVID. Like we're not going to see Ebola spreading all over the world because Ebola is so lethal. So that should, hopefully make people feel a little better. And the people that died from COVID are the ones that had multiple comorbidities. So the biggest thing you can do to keep healthy is just manage your weight, because obesity was a huge factor dying from COVID. Obesity leads to diabetes. And you're much higher risk of infection and dying from infection if you're overweight and you're diabetic. So I don't know. I mean, I don't really care what the World Health Organization, says. And I sort of look at it as an individual issue. You find a doctor you can trust, and you manage your own health to the extent you can.
Well, I agree with you if this kind of virus is coming, but we are now facing that there was some kind of gain of function. That means they were made this virus as we now know. Now I haven't seen proof. I just see this information that coming that this virus was made in laboratory. How we can know that new virus will not be made in laboratory, new one who will not be respiratory virus, some kind of different who will be more lethal? How we know that will not happen?
Well, it probably will, but I'm not worried. I'm not scared. And I think, I learned a lot from COVID, right? You can prepare, you can stay, there are things you can do to stay out of the hospital. And I don't know how accessible is ivermectin in Europe, because ivermectin works not only for COVID, it works for any kind of RNA virus. It blocks the entrance of the virus into the cell.
Yes, I am in contact with Dr. William Makis, and he was my guest also. He's treating cancer with ivermectin. I see his post every day, his cases, and he's posting. And also he said that it's very successful treatment for cancer. I never heard this before until last year.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of firsthand experience treating cancer patients with ivermectin. Because I focus on ENT, respiratory, and not cancer. But I believe him. I don't have the firsthand experience.
Well, you said we learned something from COVID. Usually, for example, when it's war, in a war, we find very much experience for surgeon for special kind of wounds. And after that, we learn and we experience advantages for future of medicine. But from this pandemic, we are still not investigating what was happened and how we can learn and what we can learn from it. For example, in Croatia, there was demand from side of some politicians for parliament to make investigation what happened. And our prime minister said, look, that was emergency situation like our war 30 years ago. But after everything finished, nobody wants to investigate and nobody wants to talk about what we learned from it. Everybody wants to forget it. And this is completely crazy for me.
Yeah, I always call it a war too. I really do think it was a war. But it's interesting because it divides, most wars bring the country together against a common enemy. But this war divided everybody. Really, it was like a war, an external force that caused a civil war in each country. And you're right. Yeah, I mean, many of us learned a lot from COVID, but unfortunately, the government wants to just sweep everything under the rug.
Yeah, you said the right word. This pandemic divided people. My personal experience is same. I don't speak to my best friends before COVID because in this crucial moment, they decided that we need to mandate vaccines and passport vaccines. And then I stopped to talk with them because I felt that they are attacking my freedom of choice and informed consent. And they didn't agree about this. But as you said, we are now facing a divided society. And if the society stays the same way, if we don't clear these things from the past, everything will be in the future potential conflict, because still we are not forgetting what was happening during pandemic.
I agree. It's a festering wound, and festering wounds don't heal on their own. They just grow. I've heard people say, if this continues like this, it's going to lead to violence because they're just, the frustrations just build up.
And that is happening at this moment because now whoever suggests to take vaccine, for example, for flu or for pediatric vaccines, nobody trusting. And now we have really, especially on social media, I'm present there every day, we're seeing lots of tense, lots of arguing about, and even people who are worried now what will happen in any case of new disease, of new treatment. People still don't trust medicine anymore like before.
Agree. I mean, that's one of the most common questions I get asked is, who can I trust? Where do I go if I need to go to the hospital? I don't have a great answer about the hospital. I do think, in an emergency situation, you break your leg, you have a heart attack, you're probably fine. But for things like, respiratory, like what happened during COVID, it's best to just do everything you can to stay out of the hospital.
That's for sure, especially when we saw some doctors who are really acting, unethical. And some of them even said that people who didn't receive vaccine doesn't deserve medical care. Even they said, we don't care about people who are unvaccinated because they don't deserve, because they don't think on others. They are not members of society responsible because they don't care about us. And this is totally unethical, and that destroying trust in medicine and in doctors, especially in Croatia. I'm feeling this every day.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we need transparency, we need accountability, because, we have to find a way to restore the trust. And if they keep sweeping everything under the rug, it just makes it even worse.
Tell me, what are your plans for future? What do you think will happen in next period in United States concerning public health? Not only public health, of course, because everything is connected now. This distrust is still present in society. And what is your suggestion how we can solve this conflicts from past and maybe even find some solution for future?
Well, there are a couple big lawsuits in America that I'm watching with hopeful anticipation. If those are successful, that could have a huge impact. Brooke Jackson, I don't know if you've ever interviewed her, but she whistleblower for Pfizer. So she was a manager for one of the research hubs, and she saw all sorts of issues going on with the way they were conducting their studies. And she went to Pfizer and she got fired. And then now she's suing. But it's been a 5-year saga. And where the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, apparently has swooped in to save Pfizer. So we need Pam Bondi to step aside so that this case can go forward, actually get into the courtroom. There's another case that I'm excited about because it's a way to hold some people accountable. In the United States, we have something called VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. And so if there's a suspicion that you've been injured by these shots, you're supposed to report it to the government, to this website. And if you don't, then you could be held liable because it's required if you're the one that gave the shot. And so there's a lawsuit challenging this. There's a physician's assistant who is suing a hospital because she got fired when she was reporting patients to VAERS. And if this happens, it kind of opens the floodgates because there's so many people out there, at least the people that I've seen, none of them with injuries reported to VAERS by other people. I've been the one that's done it, even though they've seen multiple other doctors. And I think it would be a huge avenue to sue because we have until 2029 to do this, the statute of limitations. And so it could really open things up for an enormous amount of litigation.
Yes, and an enormous amount of money possible, fines what state and of course maybe companies need to pay. And maybe this is also danger for state if they need to pay so much compensation. Okay, I hope that your expectation will be fulfilled and that will bring up something up in the public, because I still don't have any information in Europe that anything will change. Only hope coming, of course, from United States. There is a Florida, and Joseph Ladapo said that he is not mandated anymore any kind of vaccines because he is nobody who can say to anybody to take in their body what he thinks they need to take. And this is a huge step.
Yeah, I don't know how it is in Croatia. I'm curious, but yeah, to get into schools in the United States, you're forced to vaccinate your children. And, I never questioned that prior to the pandemic, and now I see it totally differently. And so I totally agree with that it should be a choice of the parent and not the government or not the school to tell you if you need to vaccinate your child.
It's not in Croatia mandated, but they give you so much trouble. If you want to take kid to the kindergarten, you need to find special kindergarten who doesn't demand vaccination. And that means it's not easy to send it, because usually people want to send it to closest kindergarten, even for schools. And it's not really clear, but they are pushing hard, and even pushing hard these vaccines, what doesn't have any sense for young people, but they are pushing. That means I recognize that these pediatric vaccines are some kind of religion. Nobody wants to talk about it. Everybody wants us to believe them. And even if we read these papers, if we know about this more than them, still they demand it. And this is completely not only strange, but it's crazy for me. Why do we need to trust something if we can read, if we can check, if we can ask? It's our health, and especially health of our children.
I agree. Does your country provide liability for the vaccines like they do in America?
It's very hard to get it. Whenever you say to your doctor, physician, you say that you are injured from vaccines, they said, well, we don't know why you are injured, but for sure it's not vaccine. And then after that, it's very hard to get it to report your injury. And it's similar like United. We don't have mandates, but it's very hard to live normal life if you don't apply, if you don't comply exactly.
Right, right. Yeah, that is a problem, that even if they remove the liability protections, you have to find a doctor willing to acknowledge that your issues come from the vaccine.
Yeah. Can you tell us for the end, what is your message for your patients, for your people in Croatia, for doctors in Croatia, because we have great doctors in Croatia, but lots of them are afraid to lose their jobs. That's why they were quiet. Some of them were very brave, and that's why they suffered. Is there any message of hope from your side?
Yeah, I mean, this is an information war, and I think we are winning because the uptake of the shots is so dismal. The mainstream media doesn't want you to believe that. But like I said earlier, only 10% of doctors continue to get these shots, which is a good sign. So I think we truly are winning, and the censorship is lifting. It's getting easier to spread the message. The most important thing you can do is speak out. So, social media is sort of a necessary evil, in my opinion. It's got its cons, that's for sure, but it is helpful. I mean, it's the more people that speak out, the better.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for being brave. I wish you all the best, and I wish you to win in these court cases. I believe that you will, because, finally we will win. It's only a matter, how are we gonna live in the meantime? And I wish you all the best in your future work.
Thank you very much. It was great to meet you.
Dragi narode, evo opet ja s ovom temom, naravno. Možda se čini malo i dosadan, međutim, naravno, ne smijemo odustati. Naime, radi se o tome da ono što sam i danas spomenuo ovdje, nije pandemija bila samo pandemija i javno zdravlje. Najmanje je bilo javno zdravlje. To nam je potpuno promijenilo živote. Naime, i zemlja se zadužila sa milijarde eura i to će iduće generacije morati vraćati od 2028. do 2058. To znači da će njihov standard životni biti niži zbog odluka koje su donesene u tom periodu. Da ne kažem također da utjecaj na povjerenje na institucije o kojima smo danas govorili je nizak. Mnogi ljudi koje ja poznajem, a ja sam nisam baš spreman tako lako dati se u ruke doktorima nakon ove pandemije, jer jednostavno sam izgubio povjerenje. Dakle, ako je neko spreman šutiti, a znati pri tome da radi pogrešno, onda kako mogu vjerovati njemu da će se o mom zdravlju pobrinuti onako kako zaslužuje svaki pacijent. Pogotovo kada znamo danas koliki utjecaj imaju farmaceutske kompanije na doktore. A farmaceutskoj kompaniji je svaki pacijent, dakle bolestan čovjek, klijent, zdrav sigurno nije. Pogotovo kad su u pitanju cjepiva. Cjepiva su posebno važna u tom pogledu jer one se daju zdravim ljudima, a ne bolesnim. Prema tome, puno onih ima koji su zainteresirani da ne budemo baš u potpunosti zdravi, a povjerenje je izgubljeno. Da ne kažem političari, to sam već i spomenuo, ali nije na odmet reći da se danas i sudi ministru koji je u to vrijeme bio ministar zdravlja i sudimo se za djelo koje, kako kaže optužnica, je dogovarao proviziju baš u vrijeme pandemije. Dakle, u vrijeme kad smo mi izgubili mnogi biznise zato što su nam bili zatvoreni za vrijeme lockdowna. Mnogi su izgubili i psihičko zdravlje. Djeca su nastradavala jer smo ih silili da nose maske, da imaju online nastavu. U to vrijeme ministar i nekoliko doktora po sumnji, dakle, još traje suđenje, odnosno slučaj, dogovarali provizije i zarađivali na tome. Pri tome, kad postavite pitanje da se o tome istraži, da se napravi istražno povjerenstvo, da se zna što se dogodilo, ne žele razgovarati o tome. Dakle, jasno je da skrivaju. Stoga je nužno da ovu temu otvaram. Nužno je da znamo što se dogodilo. Nužno je da znamo zašto smo generaciji koja dolazi iza nas ostavili toliki dug zbog takvih pogrešnih, promašenih politika za koje to danas znamo. Zašto smo kreirali inflaciju tolikom broju ljudi, zato što smo štampani novac i primarnu emisiju takozvanu radili kako bi sačuvali navodno radna mjesta i to smo sačuvali samo ona koji su bili na državnom proračunu, dok nas za male i srednje poduzetnike nije bilo briga. Ko je preživio je, a ko nije, komu je kriv. Dakle, šteta je ogromna, a da ovo još ne spomenem naravno da se društvo podijelilo, jer ako znamo da u Hrvatskoj još uvijek nismo razriješili podjele iz Drugog svjetskog rata. Još uvijek su na jednoj strani partizani, na drugoj ustaše i još jedni i drugi optužuju. Dakle, 80 godina je prošlo i još uvijek nismo razriješili te podjele. Šta mislite što će se dogoditi sa podjelama koji su nastali za vrijeme pandemije? Također ljudi koji danas se pozivaju na takozvani antifašizam su bili na strani fašista, odnosno oni koji su provodili fašističke mjere i nisu se za to ni zacrvenili. A onda se pozivaju kako su oni veliki antifašisti. Dakle, puno imamo stvari za razgovarati, puno ima nesuglasica i problema koji su ostali od pandemije i zato, to je razlog zašto ja dovodim još uvijek goste, zašto o tome razgovaram i zašto inzistiram da se te teme i dalje otvore, a dovodim goste iz cijelog svijeta s razlogom što ovdje u Hrvatskoj nije jednostavno naći nekoga ko će spremno i javno govoriti o tome. Oni koji su javno govorili su nastradali, bili su progonjeni sudskim putem, tražili su da im se uzmu licence, a evo kao što vidite to se radi i u drugim državama, posebice u Sjedinjenim državama, jer svi znamo da prve stvari koje se u svijetu dogode, prvo se dogode u Sjedinjenim državama pa onda dođu u ostatak svijeta i to je moj motiv da zovem doktore i da povežem cijelu mrežu onih koji su bile u ovoj pandemiji žrtve, da na kraju jednog dana sa nadom ipak raščistimo ono što se stvarno dogodilo i konačno ljudima kažemo istinu bez pretvaranja, jer to je jedini način kako možemo nešto naučiti i spriječiti da ponovimo iste pogreške u budućnosti. Nadam se da ste bili zadovoljni sa današnjom emisijom, sa mojom gošćom i uskoro se vidimo u sljedećoj epizodi Slobodni.
Nitko vas neće natjerati da se poklonite zvijeri, učinit ćete to svojevoljno, odbacujući vjeru. Bićete laka meta za zvijer, jer se niste podredili vjeri. Ako se ne podredite vjeri, podredit ćete se zvijeri. Toliko ćete se suobličiti sa ovim svijetom, da nećete ni prepoznati da ste u zabludi. Biće to najveća demonska prevara ikada i pravedno zaslužena osuda nad nepokajanim grešnicima.
Gdje su svi oni koji su nas liječili, zakletvom iz mrtvih dizali, svojom šutnjom ste nas izdali. Gdje su svi oni koji su nas liječili, zakletvom iz mrtvih dizali, zar su nas i oni izdali?
Gdje su svi oni koji su nas liječili, zakletvom iz mrtvih dizali, svojom šutnjom ste nas izdali?